Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I'm back in the studio today working on my vintage book journals. So if you have been following along, thank you. I appreciate all your comments. If you are brand new to my channel, I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up and click on subscribe and the little bell so you don't miss out on future videos. In the description below, I will put up link to the playlist so that if you have not been watching following along, then you can start from the beginning. I've done multiple journals because I have them going simultaneously. So the series started with the 5 Little Peppers, which is just about finished, and then I have added more videos. So these, I think, this different binding started with, I think, 9 or 10. So that way you can kind of maybe follow along if you want to jump to a specific journal that I've been working on. I do put a photo in the description so you can kind of maybe identify which journal is in which ones. But anyway, I never knew when I started it that it was going to end up involving about 6 journals at this point, I think. So anyway, eventually they will go on my Etsy shop, and I will do a video when that happens. But I don't have them all finished and ready to go yet. So the one we are working on that I kind of was almost finished was this one. And this is why I want to work on this today. And then my practice thing, I have a whole issue I wanted to talk about today. So I'm kind of using these as inspiration. This was my first attempt at doing this type of open spine binding. And so I didn't put this one on camera until I did the flip through at the end, but you will see this one show up in the videos about the Baldwin's reader, which is going to end up getting covered up. Anyway, so I'm starting to kind of work on these open spine ones, which were different than the first few that were more like this, where I didn't have a book without a spine. And then I did my slow stitch spine cover. So if you have not been following along, I'm going to just try to catch you up on where I was at, and then we'll move on from there. So when I started this one, it was going to be this open spine binding, and I made a mistake, I think, in my talking about it. So for those of you who are expert bookbinders, you may have caught that I mistakenly called this a Coptic stitch binding. And it's because I didn't really understand, I think myself, the difference between a kettle stitch and a Coptic stitch binding. So now I know, and that's what I did on this one. So I didn't do this on camera, but I just wanted to clarify that I called this a Coptic stitch binding. And it's not because, from what I understand, a Coptic stitch binding is a book without a spine like this, but you actually, when you stitch the signatures together, you stitch the cover as part of that whole thing, which is what I did on this one. So you can see the cover was stitched on when I put the book together, as opposed to this one where I stitched the text block, all the signatures separately, and then we are going to put it into the cover. So I'm ready to kind of go forward with this one, but I wanted to show you, this was my experiment, because if I back up, which I've now changed this, I know it's going to sound confusing if you have not been watching my videos, but for this cover, my intention, because I had no spine and I wanted to have the spine exposed, I had been doing this slow stitch embroidery on the spines. And for this one, I wanted to do some stitching, but I wanted to leave the spine open. So I thought, well, I'll just do a slow stitch piece, which is basically, if you're new to this, it's just a collage of fabrics and then embroidery, and you don't use a hoop. It's all very imperfect. I still have some work I want to do on this one, but I ended up deciding I was just going to do a slow stitch piece and glue it to the front of my cover. So I'll end up covering up this part. So I don't have this quite ready yet, but because I am going to do it this way instead of stitching right to this cover, we can go ahead and put this together, and then I can glue this on after the fact. So I'm going to do that today, but this one was my experiment of trying to stitch right to my book cover by puncturing holes and then embroidering right to my cover. So I didn't do very much on this because if you did watch the video where I go over this whole thing, I didn't have the right tool at the time. I was just using my little pokey tool here that I used to punch my holes in my pages, and it was making a larger hole than I thought I wanted. So I ended up ordering a little tool with little drill bits. And so I have that now. I have not tried it yet, but this is for those of you who've kind of been watching all these videos in order. I did get these drill bits and I think they're going to be perfect. You can see how tiny some of them are. I got 2 sets when I ordered these. I'll put a link down below. But it's kind of nice because they come in this package. It's kind of like needles where you slide this to the number, whatever needle drill bit you want. And it's kind of, there you go. And it kind of slides so that you can just kind of dump out the one that you want because you can see how tiny they are. So I think this might be a better thing to use to make all my holes for my embroidery pattern. And then I got this little power tool that is adjustable, but you can also get these just little battery operated ones. So that's what I'm going to use next time I try to do an embroidered cover. Because I didn't have the tool and I didn't want to punch more holes and all that, I had just glued this doily with some embroidery on the front. So then I went ahead and I decided I'm going to try to do the Coptic stitch correctly on this cover because I'd never done that before. I've done this kind of stitch, but again, in one where then I glued the cover on. So I did this, and I did it with this perle cotton embroidery. So I used all the strands, and it's kind of a thicker one. And I ran it through my little wax to kind of wax it, which didn't work as well with how cottony this is. It slid fine. Everything with stitching it was fine. I was happy with that. But the one thing that I wasn't thrilled about for myself was how thin it looks on the cover. And that's more of maybe an aesthetic thing. I did think about it when I decided which thread I wanted to use, because in the center of every signature, you see the thread. And so when I always like to just use something neutral here that's not going to show up a lot. And what happens is if I were to use something more decorative because I want to see this, then it's going to maybe, and have it be thick enough here, it's maybe thicker than I want inside. So that's why I wasn't sure. I went back and forth about it, and I decided to go ahead and do the thinner thread. And then, of course, on the outside here, it was too white for me. So I just took my little dauber with some vintage photo, and I kind of just dirtied that up, thinking this is all going to show. And so it still kind of bothers me. I think it's just the perfectionist in me. And I tried a couple of other things to maybe cover this part up and maybe tie something here. But I didn't mind this part. I do like seeing all those pages, but I decided for this one, I am going to go ahead and glue a piece of my rusted fabric because I think I'll like that just as well. And so I was going to do that. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I thought I would let you see my experiments when I'm doing something for the first time, which is the case with this one. So, I'm not an expert at anything. My whole channel is me being a beginner and sharing with you my experiences, trying to learn new things. So maybe I'll do this first before I get back to the other one, and so that this one can be drying, and we'll see what happens. So my idea, I've already trimmed this fabric. I tore it because I like that raw edge. And because I really don't want to cover up my embroidery, there is kind of this little line in the cover. My goal is to really just cover just that little bit there so that I don't see those threads. And then I don't mind how that looks at all. I do have a little gold in my stitching, so that didn't bother me. And then I think I'm going to try actually gluing it to those pages. Not sure how that's going to work out. Now the other part of me, I'm second guessing myself and kind of wondering if I should do it like a floating spine, because this is then more decorative. And to do that, I would attach this to my paper towel roll, and then really just have it glued on those edges, because it's really, to me, more to hide those threads than to be functional as far as the book staying together. It's a little bit loosey-goosey. I don't think it's, it moves because it just doesn't have anything like the other way that I do those to kind of hold this together. When I do glue this one together, you'll understand what I mean. It just has this, because the way it's attached, it's just kind of like this. But the good thing about it, and this will be the same way, is when you're going to work on it, you can see I did this one really thick. This is a really big journal. Is all the pages lay nice and flat. When you're working on them, you don't get that little rounded thing at all. So it is kind of nice. You do end up with a little bit of gap in between your signatures, but you could always, if you're doing a spread sort of thing, you can always put some washi tape or a piece of fabric or something there. I didn't really mind that at all. I thought it went together really well, but it's just, and it feels sturdy and all that, like I can add, still add things to it. But I do like how it lays flat. So I'm not sure now. I'm second guessing my thing just here on camera. Is, do I want to glue to the actual this, or do I want to use my paper towel roll and then have it, that will give it that rounded spined look? I'm almost tempted to do that because I've never done it before. So let's do that. What the heck? Okay, so I'm going to go get a paper towel roll. Okay, in case you didn't know what I was talking about. So I save my paper towel rolls and use them for spines. I usually just go ahead and cut them just to be able to store them this way. I can store more stacked in my little long drawer. So I just have a whole bunch like this. And it's just, you already have it curved, which is nice. So I just need to figure out how wide I want it to be, so that I end up with that kind of floating spine look. So I need to measure this, and I'm just gonna maybe do it right to my book. Do I want it to be a little shorter? Maybe a tiny bit. So I'm going to trim that off. Okay, hopefully I did that good. And then my spine is, about 1.5 inches. But I want that curve in there. So I probably want it a little bit more than 1.5 inches. So let me cut this. There, that'll look okay. It's almost like I want to do another one and glue it to this, but I don't think that's going to look as nice. It's going to end up being, it's going to always want to fall in like that. So I think doing it this way is probably smarter. Okay, so we are going to just do that. I think the tricky part is I do want to get, this is totally a backwards way of doing this, I'm sure, but it's me trying to fix something I didn't like. Let's see, if I measure, I need it to be 1/2 inch. So I want this, go the right direction that I had liked, this way. So this needs to be 1/2 inch from this edge where I glue it. So I think the easiest thing is I'm going to put glue on this. And you can use any kind of PVA glue. I'm using my neutral pH bookbinding glue, but you can use anything. And then this way it may not wet my fabric as much if I put the glue here. And for this part, a glue stick may have even been fine to glue this down. Wetting this with glue does kind of take some of your curve out, but it will easily want to go back. Okay, so I want to be kind of a 1/2 inch. And I'm just eyeballing, so where's my ruler? It's just about right. When you've been doing things for this long, all the construction things I've done, you get to where you can eyeball your measurements pretty good. And that way I would just be gluing this to my cover and then to the back. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little glue along that edge. So this is not an official way, I don't think, to do this book. Like I said, it's just me kind of fixing something that I was not happy with. And like I said, I wanted to do it on camera because I don't, you know, it's nice to kind of share my mistakes too. So I'm just following that straight line that I had. I don't want to rub this too much because I don't know if you noticed, but when I got that wet, I had used, if you watch this video, I had used my Distress Oxides and inks to get this book to be this color. And when you introduce liquid, it activates the oxides. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's these Distress Oxides. They are activated by water as opposed to the Distress ink, which is not. So I used a mixture of both on these, and I don't want that green color to come through my rusty fabric. So I'm just going to not touch that too much till it dries. So then I would go and really fit that in where I want it. And then glue just this other back side, and it's just going to fit perfect to cover up these holes. So let me see if I can get glue on and do that, and we'll be done, except for the drying. This is just a little silicone spreader. It just keeps your fingers from getting all gluey. And it gets a kind of a nice even little coat. Now, if you watch this, you know, you're going to notice that this front and back cover are not from the same book. They were just two random pieces that I had that happened to be about the same size. So we're going to hope this works. Now what I should have done is I should have, but maybe I can do this. Or maybe I can take it off and redo it. I should cover the inside of that. So maybe I'm going to take this off and then, but you get the idea. I'm going to pull this off and I'm going to do that because I don't want this to, I want to cover this because you'll see it. So I'm going to get some more fabric and put on the inside, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to glue it back. So I'm not going to do this right now because I want to let this dry and find the fabric. but I will come back and we'll do a flip through of this when I do have it correct. But so you see, I don't always do things right, but there's always a way to fix things. So we're gonna try this again. Okay, now moving on, let's hope I do this one right. This type I have done before, so I'm not gonna worry about this because I need to finish it, but I decided what I wanted to do was to do these little tabs, and I like the idea of having this stitching. It's all pretty subtle so far anyway. I don't know how it's going to end up, and I think what I'll do is I'll glue them just so I get them exactly on my spine where I want them. I'm going to glue them down to my spine first, and then we'll attach them to the cover. So let me see. I don't want them too wet, so I'm tempted, and it's really this part. I really just want it here in the center, but I want to be careful about getting glue in between those pages. So part of me is thinking just use glue stick to stick it down to here, because then it's going to get glued to something else. It's either that or put it onto my fabric. So just wherever you want to cover up those threads. So we'll do one there. And you can see I didn't stitch all the way to the ends because these are going to get glued down to the cover, and I didn't want them too bulky. And I'm not measuring, I'm just eyeballing. Okay, I like that. Okay, so then what I want to do is, where's my front? This is my front and my back. See how that's going to look? I really like that. It's going to look good. As I look through the camera, which you always see, it always looks a little different, and I hold it back. This one looks a little light to me compared to the other colors. You know, I got one piece of fabric and just started tearing it, so you can see when it's this rusty fabric, you have lights and darks and different things. So I can, if that bothers me too much, and I don't know that it will or not, but I could always take my, you know, something like this and color it up a little more if it bugs me, but I think it's fine. Okay, so I have my front cover. We'll do that one first. And remember, if you followed along with this one I decided I wanted fabric to come instead of paper, to put fabric there. It's a little more forgiving when you have lumpy things to do fabric. So what I did was for my first signature and my last signature. I got to find the beginning and the end of it here. I have this piece of fabric. This is the last, this is one folio folded in half. But it's fabric on one side, and then I used the fabric and glued it and stitched it down to a piece of paper so that it's paper on the other side. And then at the end, same thing, is I have my fabric and glued and stitched to a piece of paper. So that was just one way. If you did not watch this from the beginning, that was how I went about that, so that I would have that fabric attached. So now what I want to do is just kind of get this lined up so that the edge of my first folio is lined up with this little crease. That way these will be kind of like flaps that then I can stitch like a corset or some kind of stitch across. So it's really just decorative once these are glued down, and my fabric, that's what's really holding the book to this cover. So I think what I'll do first is glue these tabs down, and then, so I have to kind of hold this and then glue the fabric down. So this doesn't have to be exact where I mean, it has to be exact where I put it, but I'm not too worried about where I put my glue because I'm going to be gluing this whole thing down. So I'm just going to line it up there and just squirt some glue just to get these stuck down. Let's see. I had these glued a little around my fabric, so I'm pulling that off just so that I know I have this where I want these tabs where I want them to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and I just want to make sure those are really stuck down. And then I'll go ahead, if I move this, you can kind of see it's to that edge where that fold is. So then I'm just going to put glue on this whole thing here now. Okay, now I want some, just like everything else, I want some weight on this because I really want this glue to dry here and have it be really firm. So I'm going to want to put some books, heavy books and weight on that. So I think I'm going to put something there now while I work on this other side. So let me get something. Plastic, you might want to use a craft sheet, something that's not going to stick to this, that I can put weight right up to this seam. So let me grab these handy little things I have, and I'm going to put that right up to that seam. And then you could grab a book. I'm going to grab a book and a weight. So go right up to that crease. And then I'm going to put a heavy weight there. And then that way I can either let that dry and come back, or I can just go ahead and hopefully get it lined up. Because I have this fabric already cut, I really know where it goes to the edge. You know, I really know this way. So if I can just slip that in there. I know that when I put this fabric down, it helps me to see which, you know, I want the front and the back to be lined up correctly. I could also move this a little bit just to make sure. But because, like I said, because my fabric's cut already, I know where that is. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. Make sure I'm right in that crease where I want to be. So get all my little tabs down first. Okay, same thing. I want to put something heavy here and let that dry for a few minutes too. And I'm going to dry it for just a few minutes, and then I'll come back and check it. And we'll take a look at it and see. Just set this here. Okay, I'm going to let this sit here for a few minutes, and then I will come back and we'll see how it looks. Okay, it's only been a few minutes. I went ahead and fixed this other book, and it's drying now. But you can see I added some fabric inside the spine too, which I should have done to begin with, to hide the fact that that was a paper towel roll. But I think I'm going to like this better. It's just a floating spine book because of the way it's put together. It is a little loosey-goosey. Normally when you build a book like this, I guess I could have done it since I was going to cover this up anyway. I'm doing all this in hindsight. But normally the way it should have gone together is if I had not put this fabric on first, when I had this block built, the text block built, I would have glued a piece of scrim or something to the text block, right, with little wings. And then those little wings would be like the tabs were on this. Those little wings would have gotten glued down to this cover, and then this cover fabric would have gone over it. But because the way I stitched it, stitched it through to the front, that wouldn't have worked either. So this was kind of an afterthought fix because I just decided I didn't like the way that stitching looked on the front of my cover. So it's just about dry, but I think it's going to actually work better and feel a little bit less wonky to me. But I do like how that turned out. That was a good, experiment doing a Coptic stitch the correct way on a cover. So this one, again, is a kettle stitch, and I'm going to try to do a legitimate Coptic stitch on the cover on camera when maybe the next time I do one, which will actually be soon. I think I have another one that I actually need to do for somebody, for a family friend, and she wants a Coptic stitch. So I may do hers that way with an exposed spine. We'll see. So I'm going to remove this just to see how dry we are and see what we have here. If I got lined up okay. It will need to dry further, but that's going to be perfect. And then I'll stitch this somehow in an attractive way. I don't know yet. I really want to use leather, and I don't think I have any leather here. But we'll see what I have. So I think that's going to be good. That's stitched up when I get this finished. And then I like that I stitched that little bit on those tabs. So that's going to end up being kind of a cool looking thing when I finish it. So hopefully I'll finish up this piece, and then maybe the next video that I do this book, I will do this back finishing up and then a closure or something, and then we'll take a look at what we have inside. So that's it for today. I know it was a clunky video, but that's how it works sometimes when you're doing something for the first time that you've never tried before. So I hope that you enjoyed it anyway. Please leave comments or questions down in the description or down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. So have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.